TV shows remain a major source of entertainment for most people, even if the way we watch TV is changing. So it's unsurprising that there are many conspiracy theories and rumors about what we watch on TV. These range from simple theories about reality TV being fake or scripted, to dark stories about the treatment of cast members behind the scenes. Number 10. When the reality TV show Storage Wars first hit the A&E network in 2010, it captured the imaginations of millions of viewers. The show was about buyers bidding on storage lockers that had been abandoned by their owners, often uncovering hidden treasures that would net them healthy profits. While the show inspired many to get into the business themselves, others were skeptical about just how authentic the show actually was. In December of 2012, star Dave Hester confirmed that the show was more fake than reality. Storage Wars' premise was simple. In many parts of the US, storage units are abandoned when the renters can't afford to keep paying rent. Rather than collecting their items, the contents are left hidden behind locked doors. Occasionally, the owners of these facilities will host auctions, where members of the public can purchase the entire contents of a unit. For many, this was a good way to get some cheap furniture or old clothes. But some people searched these abandoned units for hidden antiques or valuables, which they could then sell in their own stores. Dave Hester was one of these people. Starting in 2010, he and a handful of other professional bidders shared their business with the public in the TV show. A key part of the show's drama was that the bidders had little idea what they were actually buying. The doors of the unit would be open, but they were not allowed to go inside or search through the contents. Despite the fact that it often looked like they were bidding on useless items, more often than not, the bidders would find something valuable hidden beneath the clutter. In early seasons of the show, this included a car and vintage newspapers from the date Elvis Presley passed away. Considering just how often the bidders seemed to get lucky, many fans of the show were skeptical about the authenticity of the show. Those theories were confirmed in December of 2012, when Hester filed a lawsuit against A&E and the showrunners. In the lawsuit, he claimed much of the show was fake. Storage units were allegedly salted with valuable items that had been purchased from antique stores in similar locations. Appointments for appraisals were booked ahead of time, making it clear that the so-called hidden gems were well known by the production staff. On some occasions, multiple units would be combined to make the show even more interesting. A&E won the case based on its First Amendment right. They hadn't proven that the show wasn't rigged, only that there was nothing illegal about seating the units as they had been doing. Despite the lawsuit, Hester would go on to feature in later seasons of the show, which is still on air to this day. Number 9. In November of 2018, a variety show in Japan came under fire for faking a popular segment. At first, it seemed like this might be one more story in a conspiracy theory that states many TV shows are broadcasting fiction as reality. But as more information emerged, it was clear that there was some truth behind this story. The TV show in question was Sekai no Hate Mare Ite-Q. Ite-Q is one of the most popular weekly TV shows in Tokyo, and features comedians traveling around the world to do interesting and unique things. It brought a slice of the lives of people around the world into Japanese homes, all with a humor that made it one of the most watched shows in the area. One of the regular segments featured one of the comedians traveling to unique and strange festivals being hosted in foreign countries. But this would stop after the investigative magazine Shukan Bunshun ran a series of articles on the show. The writers alleged that some of the festivals featured on the Ite-Q were fake, and that local people featured in the segment had been paid to be there. 2 recent features were highlighted as being more fiction than fact. One was a festival that allegedly took place in Thailand. The festival included a cauliflower picking contest and was aired in February of 2018. Another festival took place in Laos and involved riding a bike over a narrow plank of wood. Both had been set up by the program and wouldn't have taken place if Ite-Q hadn't been recording. At first, Nippon TV disputed these claims, but it wasn't long before the truth came out. In the same month, the network's president issued a statement apologizing for the controversy. He didn't go as far as saying the entire segment had been made up by producers, but instead, he claimed the show stretched what could be considered a festival and featured events that fans at home wouldn't think of as festivals. He also claimed that festival participants had been paid money through local coordinators. It later emerged that the show hadn't simply stretched the definition of the word festival, but it might not have been entirely to blame for the deception either. It was local coordinators, rather than the show's regular producers, who'd organized the so-called festivals, and had been involved in the faking. This didn't make the segments look any more truthful, but did provide some cover for the network. About a year and a half after the festival segment was suspended, it returned in 2020. Comedian Daisuke Miyagawa traveled to the United States for a fruitcake tossed festival, an event that's been taking place in Colorado since 1996. Even though the network was now making sure the festivals were actually real, there was a worry in the industry that the revelations might have shaken trust in TV and helped to convince the general public that other TV shows might be in on the conspiracy. Number 8. Every day, late-night talk show hosts are beamed through television into the homes of millions of people. For many people, they provide a friendly face. Their personalities are generally warm and inviting to the audience, as they make jokes about the topic of the day. But for years, there have been rumors that the personalities that we see on TV shows are not what they seem. In 2023, The Tonight Show host Jimmy Fallon was the latest person to prove these rumors correct. Fallon has hosted the NBC late night show since 2014, moving over from late night on the same station. Fallon brought with him many of the staff members who'd been part of the previous show, as well as the in-house bands and parts of the show's format. The Tonight Show was one of the biggest talk shows on television at the time, so staff members were excited about the progress in their careers. But according to an expose published by the Rolling Stone magazine, the dream soon turned into a nightmare. Over the span of 9 years, the show featured 9 different showrunners, all of whom were putting pressure on the staff below them in their own unique ways. Being part of a daily comedy show inevitably has a lot of pressure. To stay fresh, the topics of the jokes would have to change as the news cycle did, and writers had to balance a line of staying up to date, but not making light of topics too soon for their audience. But according to the staff featured in the expose, the atmosphere of The Tonight Show went further than what was the norm in the industry. The Rolling Stone spoke to 2 staff members who were still part of the show, as well as 14 people who'd left the show for various reasons. Some had been fired for no apparent reason, with even HR expressing confusion about why the person had been let go. Others had left the show for their own mental health. Staff members described how working on the show took a toll on their health. Guest dressing rooms were described as crying rooms, as these were places where staff members could go to release the pressure that built during the workday. Some former staff members described nightmares, losing their hair, and damaging their nail beds due to the stress of the environment. The Tonight Show is far from the only TV program to have been accused of hosting a toxic work environment by staff members. What made these accusations different, though, was that staff members claimed that Fallon was a part of the toxicity. After the expose was published, Fallon apologized to staff in an all-hands Zoom call. He called the article embarrassing and apologized if he'd embarrassed anyone who'd worked under him. Number 7. When a television series is running for a long time, it's normal for the showrunners to mix up the cast a little to try to keep things fresh. New characters are introduced, and old ones might be written out. The reason behind these decisions vary, from the character having run their purpose in the story to behind-the-scenes drama involving the actors. Just how these characters are written off the show can be as varied as the reasons behind the decision. Sometimes a story leaves the door open for a character to make a return at a later date. On other occasions, heartbreaking storylines feature the tragic demise of the character, making it clear they won't be coming back. But one of the most bizarre times that a character is written off a TV show involved the sitcom Cheers. In 1987, the sitcom introduced Eddie LeBeck as a side character and love interest for barmaid Carla Tortelli. They started a relationship, and Carla later became pregnant, prompting the couple to get married. LeBeck was played by actor Jay Thomas and appeared in a handful of episodes over the next 2 years. His job on a traveling ice show kept him out of town most of the time, and he would only feature in a show when he appeared at Carla's place of work. In 1989, Cheers showrunners were making a decision over whether Thomas should become a full-time cast member. They were already a lot of secondary characters, and the team were choosing between LeBeck and another character who was also a love interest to one of the main cast members. Thomas was optimistic about getting the job, but the showrunners had to tell him they wouldn't be inviting him back. Not only was Thomas not going to be a regular cast member, but his character wouldn't appear in the show again. LeBeck lost his life off-screen in a freak Zamboni accident. At his funeral, Carla learns that her husband had another wife and family, softening the loss and sullying LeBeck's character further. The decision shocked fans, and there was immediately speculation about why the decision had been made. The official reason the TV show gave was simply that fans didn't like Carla being married, but many thought there was more to the story. Among those who felt that way was Thomas. Before he started acting, Thomas had made his name as a radio DJ and continued to host a radio show during his time on Cheers. On one show, a listener called in and asked what it was like to be on Cheers. Thomas joked that it was brutal because he had to kiss Rhea Perlman, the actress who played Carla. According to Thomas, he earned combat pay for kissing her. None of the comments were serious, but it was apparently a joke too far for Rhea. This wasn't the first time he'd made public comments about her appearance. According to one of the show's writers, Rhea came into his office demanding that Thomas be kicked off the show. Even though Rhea herself denied having any animosity towards Thomas, others who worked behind the scenes on the show backed up this story. Director James Burrows claimed in his autobiography that Thomas's comment was the catalyst for his character's demise. According to Burrows, they felt like when he insulted Rhea, he insulted all of them. Writer Ken Levine also wrote about the incident on his blog. Number 6. For many children growing up in the 1970s, Buffy Sainte-Marie was a familiar face on television. She made regular appearances on the Sesame Street show, teaching the characters and their young audience about Native Americans and First Nations people. But even while Sainte-Marie was rising to fame, there were a few rumors in newspapers that her Indigenous American heritage wasn't quite what it seemed. In 2023, a CBC documentary appeared to prove this was the case. Buffy Sainte-Marie first rose to fame as a singer-songwriter. She was born in 1941 and studied at the University of Massachusetts in the 1960s. It was there that her music first started to reach the general public, as she wrote anti-war songs, as well as music about the experiences of Indigenous Americans in the US and Canada. This became a major feature of her career. Sainte-Marie claimed to have Indigenous heritage, but was adopted by a white US family and raised in a small town where she felt out of place. Over the years, the exact details of her heritage changed. The general story was that she was born on a Canadian reservation to Cree parents. In some versions of the story, she didn't know anything about her birth family, while in others, she claimed her mother passed away shortly after she was born. Sainte-Marie's heritage was very important to her, and she used her platform to speak about problems Native people were facing at the time, and about the history of mistreatment. One of her key messages when she appeared on Sesame Street was that Native Americans were real people who existed, and not characters resigned to fictional stories and history books. Sainte-Marie talked about being a mother, helping to teach other children about sibling rivalry, and made history when she nursed her young son on the show. Outside of Sesame Street, she continued to perform music, raise awareness for Indigenous issues, and earned awards for her career. At the same time, the Sainte-Marie family disputed her heritage claims. In a 2023 CBC documentary, journalists managed to track down her birth certificate from a Massachusetts hospital. In official biographies, Sainte-Marie claimed she could not locate her birth certificate and believed any written record of her birth in Canada had been destroyed in a fire. The New England birth certificate showed she'd been born in the town of Stoneham and was signed by the same doctor who delivered her younger sister years later. The filing system would have made it extremely difficult to have their certificate faked later, and the certificates were numbered by birth, and Sainte-Marie's was filed between two other children born within a few days of her. If she'd been adopted months later, faking the birth certificate would have required amending the certificates of all the children registered in that same town. Some have also questioned why no record of her adoption could be found. This might have been destroyed, although according to some indigenous historians, they were typically more records related to the adoption of indigenous children than others, and the disappearance of these papers was worrying. San Marie claimed that rather than being adopted from unrelated parents, only one of her Massachusetts parents was her biological parent. She was born out of wedlock, and the other parent is where she got her indigenous heritage. San Marie has never taken a DNA test, but her sister and son both have. The results of these tests seem to dispute her story. Whether or not the conspiracy theory is considered true, San Marie's work has raised awareness on important problems faced by many people in North America today. Number 5. Hell's Kitchen is possibly the most famous cooking competition on TV. For decades, the American version of the show has entertained viewers, drawn in by the drama and the comedy of professional chefs struggling with relatively simple dishes. The high number of mistakes many of the chefs make has left many viewers wondering just how much of the show is real. Unlike other reality TV shows, Hell's Kitchen isn't scripted, but the competition is made for TV, and that means there is some manipulation of the reality. One of the most obvious ways this is done is through sleep deprivation. Chefs competing in the show are woken up around 7 a.m. to start a full day of filming. That normally begins with an early competition before half of the group spends the entire day preparing the kitchen for service and undergoing some kind of punishment for losing the challenge. The dinner service itself ends at about 11 p.m., but the show isn't finished then. The chefs must clean up, record confessionals, and go through the elimination process. It's not until the early hours of the morning that filming is done for the night. Chefs then have to cook their own food, and only then can they finally go to sleep. According to former contestants, they would typically sleep for between 0 to 5 hours a night. But this wasn't the only way producers manipulated the competition to make the most entertaining show possible. Contestants are chosen not for their cooking skills, but for their personalities. While the contestants do typically have a cooking background, their ability to cook isn't as important in the interview process as how they would react to the pressure and drama that features on the show. According to at least one former contestant, part of that drama was created by the producers themselves. Most of the chefs are competent cooks, but seem to mess up simple dishes regularly. This isn't only due to the immense pressure and the fact that most are sleep deprived. According to contestant Tech Moore, the producers would swap out ingredients without the contestants noticing. This would include swapping things like sugar with salt. One contestant allegedly told the camera that he knew the contest was rigged in a confessional interview, but this interview was never aired and he was later removed from the show. Number 4. There are few programs in the history of television that have been as popular and as controversial as The Jerry Springer Show. What started out as just another daytime talk show turned into a cultural icon, which made headlines for its shocking and disturbing content. During its almost 3 decades on air, The Jerry Springer Show was watched by millions of viewers, both in the US and around the world. The format has been copied by other shows, spawning a new genre of TV. Every day, people would come onto the show to talk about their problems. Normally, this would involve relationship drama, with infidelity a common subject. Over time, the topics became even more controversial, with shocking twists about who was involved in the cheating. One episode that became banned after its initial airing involved a man who claimed to have married a horse. As the stories became even more incredible, many of those watching began to question just how much of what they were seeing was actually real. Even as far back as 1988, the theory that The Jerry Springer Show was fake seemed to have been proven true. The show had been in its controversial format for around 4 years at this point. Jerry Springer was one of the most famous men in the United States, and his show was rivaling Oprah for ratings. He was asked to feature on many other programs, including ABC's 2020. Springer turned down 2020 due to his busy schedule, but the program went ahead and featured former guests who had appeared on the show. They claimed they'd been encouraged to make up their story and to stage a fight to get the audience excited. The man they blamed wasn't Springer himself, but producer Norm LeBeau. The Jerry Springer Show claimed LeBeau was the only person involved in these fabrications. They maintained that, for the most part, the show featured real people who were there to talk about their problems. Guests even signed paperwork stating they were telling the truth. But when a documentary about the show was released in 2023, it was clear the guests were, at the very least, encouraged to be more aggressive than they otherwise may be. So while the entirety of the show and its stories may not be fake per se, a lot of the scenes are amped up at the very least. Number 3. For years, fans of Saturday Night Live had tuned in to laugh at Norm Macdonald's takes on the week's news in a parody news segment, Weekend Update. But at the start of 1998, he was unexpectedly replaced and later left the show altogether. There was immediate speculation over why Macdonald disappeared from the show. Decades later, many of those who worked with Macdonald have accepted one of the conspiracy theories as truth. When Macdonald passed away in 2021, he was praised as one of the funniest people of his generation by both comedians and his general audience. He joined Saturday Night Live in 1993 as a featured player and writer, and was soon a hit with fans. Macdonald became known for his impression work, but would gain even more popularity as the anchor of Weekend Update. The small segment saw Macdonald make jokes about news stories that had made the headlines that week. His deadpan tone only made the often mocking jokes even funnier to the audience. The nature of the segment meant it wasn't without controversy. Many of the subjects tackled in the Weekend Update were serious issues, and some people took offense at Macdonald's humor. This was especially the case when the subject involved violent crimes. Despite a few controversies, the segment ran without interference from NBC, SNL's broadcaster, but that would change in 1997. For years, one of the frequent targets on Weekend Update was O.J. Simpson. In 1995, there were few people in the news as often as the former footballer, who was now on trial for taking the life of his ex-wife and her friend. The trial lasted for several months, and most of it played out in front of court cameras. The footage was regularly featured in news programs, and the trial was described as the most publicized in American history. With the subject featuring in the news so often, it was unsurprising that it also regularly featured in the Weekend Update. The jokes normally hinged on the assumption that Simpson was clearly guilty of the crime, and mocked any doubt in his verdict. Even after the trial was over, Macdonald and his writers continued to make jokes at the expense of Simpson. The jokes got laughs from the studio audience and those watching at home, but at least one person didn't find them funny. Don Ohlmeyer was the president of NBC's West Coast division at the time. He was also known to be friends with Simpson. Ohlmeyer had been in his role since 1993, but it wasn't until later that he turned his focus to SNL. The comedy show had enjoyed relative independence from the TV network, with producers allowed more control than might be seen on other shows. Ohlmeyer would try to change that, and Macdonald was one of the things he wanted to change. At the end of 1997, Macdonald was removed from his role on Weekend Update. According to Ohlmeyer, it was due to a slump in ratings during that period of the show. People turned off, and Ohlmeyer didn't think Macdonald was funny enough for this role. In 1998, he was let go from SNL entirely. But many people, including other comedians in the industry, believed Macdonald's jokes about Simpson were the cause of his dismissal. The fact that Macdonald was soon invited back to host SNL for a short stint seemed to be proof that the cause for his dismissal wasn't simply that he wasn't funny enough. Number 2. Modern TV audiences are used to seeing game show contestants win tens of thousands of dollars in games of chance and general knowledge. But in the 1980s, such big cash prizes were unheard of, which was why when Michael Larson won over $100,000 in a single day in 1984, many people suspected there was something strange going on behind the scenes. The audience, and even the show's own producers, believed Larson was somehow managing to cheat at what should have been a game of chance. Larson hadn't cheated, but it was true that there was more to Larson's story than simple good luck. Michael Larson was born in Ohio in 1949. According to his family, he'd always had an interest in get-rich-quick schemes. He thought he was smarter than the average person and didn't want to spend his life working a typical job. In 1983, his latest obsession was TV game shows. He believed he had what it took to win big on one of these shows, but was going to go into it as prepared as possible. That year, a new game show had launched on CBS. Press Your Luck was partially a general knowledge quiz show, but it was mostly a game of chance. Contestants would answer questions to earn spins on a giant light-up board. 18 squares would light up seemingly at random. The contestant would press a button to stop the flashing lights and earn whatever was behind the square that the light had landed on. This could range from a few $100s to thousands of dollars, or even prizes like foreign vacations. But hidden behind some of the squares was a cartoon character known as the Whammy. Selecting this square would see the contestant lose everything they had won so far. The sequence of lights on the board was supposed to be random, but Larson realized this wasn't the case. Larson had become obsessed with the show and watched each episode countless times to figure out the sequence. He realized there were 5 different sequences of where the light would move. The locations of the prizes and the whammies could also be figured out. With this knowledge, Larson spent the last of his money to travel to Los Angeles to appear on the show. During his time watching Press Your Luck, he had also picked up on the mannerisms and personalities that the show liked in its contestants. He mimicked what he thought producers would like. The producers loved his story of an out-of-work ice cream van driver. The contestant coordinator thought there was something off about Larson, but he couldn't figure out exactly what it was, so he was still accepted onto the show. During the first round, there didn't seem to be anything out of the ordinary. This was where the general knowledge segment took place, and Larson couldn't keep up with the other 2 contestants. But in the second part of the show, it soon became obvious there was something wrong. Larson was the first to spin on the board. He initially only had a handful of spins, but hidden behind some of the squares were extra spins. Over the course of the next few minutes, Larson spun over 40 times. He hit the same square more often than not, accumulating large cash prizes and 2 vacations. The only time he hit a whammy was with his first spin of the show, before he'd actually won anything. By the time the show ended, Larson had won prizes worth $110,237. The network initially wanted to withhold Larson's prizes. They were certain that he had to have cheated. Nobody had ever won that much money in a game show before in history. But Larson hadn't actually broken any rules, and they had to hand over the cash. Unfortunately for Larson, his luck wouldn't continue. He lost a lot of the money in a bad real estate investment and a burglary, and he was later wanted by the FBI for his role in a multi-level marketing scheme. Number 1. It's not uncommon for there to be accusations of vote rigging or foul play when the results of TV talent competitions are announced. This is especially the case when there's an unexpected winner or a fan favorite is mysteriously eliminated from the show. In most cases, there's no actual evidence for these conspiracy theories, but the Minette scandal of 2019 stands out as an example of this actually happening. Minette is a South Korean TV music channel that started broadcasting talent competitions in 2016. Produce 101 was the first of these competitions and featured 101 female contestants competing for a place on an 11-member K-pop girl band. The lineup would be determined by public votes rather than the opinion of industry experts. Over 3 elimination rounds, the 101 contestants, or trainees, would be reduced to 22 for the final episode. From those, further voting would determine the final 11 singers who would be part of the band. The name of the band was also selected by the audience at home. The first season of Produce 101 was immensely popular, and 3 more seasons would be produced in South Korea. Spin-off programs would be produced in China, Thailand, and Japan. But the show wouldn't continue in its home nation after the controversy surrounding the results of its final season. Produce X 101 was supposed to produce an 11-member K-pop boy band from 101 contestants, using the same format as earlier seasons. The show ran for 12 episodes, and eventually the 11 members were selected to form the band X1. But when the final vote numbers were revealed, some audience members noticed something odd. There seemed to be a pattern to the numbers, with the difference between the votes being the same for several contestants. On 5 occasions, the difference in the number of votes was exactly 29,978 votes. If this had happened just twice, it would have been a strange coincidence, but 5 times seemed impossible. A difference of 7,494, or 74,945, votes was seen 6 times, making it even more obvious that some vote manipulation had taken place. The show's producers were confronted with this theory. At first, they claimed that the numbers may not have been accurate, but the overall rankings were. The fan votes had still contributed to the formation of the boy band, and nobody had been eliminated based on the incorrect figures. But it later emerged that the conspiracy went much further than that. Throughout all 4 seasons of the show, the rankings had been manipulated by the show's producers. This was often at the request of the agencies that represented the contestants. On some occasions, the agencies wanted their talent to be eliminated early, as they didn't agree with the way the profits from the music would be shared, or so that they could be freed up for other opportunities. In other instances, agencies would allegedly pay bribes to producers, sometimes in the form of entertainment, in order to get favorable television time for their contestants. Throughout the 4 seasons, 6 of the potential pop stars were eliminated from Produce 101 due to the vote rigging. The rigging also infiltrated other Mnet shows, making it hard for viewers to believe that any of the competitions had actually been influenced by their votes. The fact that voting cost money meant this was more than a TV company lying to its audience. The people involved in the scandal were charged with fraud, bribery, and obstruction of business, with several people receiving prison sentences. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.